Note, even though it's a little space one-shot, but I won't use baby language. Beautiful morning, and a beautiful but bratty boy was sleeping peacefully. Who is he? He is Park Jimin. He is the only son of Parks. He has little space. He is 24 years old and he studies in university but rarely goes, because it's almost the end of his semester, and moreover, he is in little space most of the time, that's why he doesn't go. He is cute but a total beat. He is a naughty little space guy. Wake up, baby, Mrs. Park said. No, let me sleep, Jimin said. Baby, get up and have your breakfast, Mrs. Park said.
Mama, let me sleep, Jimin said. Baby, we have to go today, Mrs. Park said. Jimin sat on the bed and said, Where is Mama Papa going? Jimin asked. Just for a little trip, Mrs. Park said. What about Chimmy then? Jimin asked.
Your friend will come and he'll take care of you, Mrs. Park said. My friend, 𝒂𝒐𝒕𝒕, Jimin asked. No, a new friend for my Chimmy, Mrs. Park said. A new friend for Chimmy, really, Mama? Jimin asked. Yes, baby, he'll come soon. Now get up and get ready, Mrs. Park said. Okay, Mama, Chimmy will go and take shower, Jimin said. He got up and went to the washroom to take a shower. Mrs. Park went downstairs. In the living room, is it the right decision to make Chim stay with Yoongi? Mr. Park said. Obviously, and moreover, Yoongi is also his life partner, Mrs. Park said. You're right, but I'm worried about Chimmy, Mr. Park said. Don't be worried. You know Yoongi and Jimin used to play together. In childhood, Yoongi always took care of him. He'll take care of him, and Mrs. Park said. Mr. Park was about to say something when doorbell rang. I'll go and see, Mrs. Park said. She got up and went from there. Who's there? Mrs. Park asked from inside. It's Yoongi, Aunt Yoongi said from outside. Mrs. Park opened the door and said, Oh my, oh my, oh my, see who comes, Mrs. Park said. Yoongi smiled and hugged Mrs. Park. How are you, Aunt? Yoongi asked. I'm fine, kid. Let's go inside, Mrs. Park said. They both went inside the living room. In the living room, Yoongi's pub, I came inside the living room with Aunt and saw a boy sitting in the living room. A boy, such a beautiful boy. I've never seen a beautiful boy like him. My eyes got stuck on him, Yoongi, Mrs. Park said.
Yes, Aunt, Yoongi said. Where were you lost? Mrs. Park asked. And nowhere, Yoongi said.
Won't you greet me, Yoongi? Mr. Park asked. Why won't I, Uncle? Yoongi said. He went to Mr. Park and hugged him. How are you, Uncle? Yoongi asked. I'm fine. How are you, son? Mr. Park said. I'm also fine. Is he Jimin? Yoongi asked.
Yes, he is Jimin. Jimin, greet him. He is Yoongi, your cousin, Mr. Park said. Hi, Yoongi, Jimin said. Hi, Yoongi said.
Min Yoongi, he is 26 years old and he is a doctor in profession. He is the son of Mrs. Park's sister. His parents died when he was 15 years old. After that, Mr. and Mrs. Park took care of him.
But sooner he starts to work on his own, so he goes from their home. Mr. and Mrs. Park loves Yoongi like their own child.
Last wish of Mrs. Min was that Yoongi and Jimin and Yoongi should get married. Mr. and Mrs. Park also likes Yoongi for their son, so they easily agreed. Right now, our and Mrs. Park are going to Dubai for some business purposes. That's why they called Yoongi to take care of him, and because they trust Yoongi. We have to go within half hour. You'll take care of Jimin, right? Mr. Park said. Obviously, Uncle. I'll take care of him, Yoongi said. We are glad that we have a son like you, Mrs. Park said. Yoongi smiled warmly listening to it. Jimin, you won't trouble Yoongi, okay baby, Mrs. Park said. I won't, Mama, Jimin said with a devilish smirk. Yoongi noticed it and chuckled silently. He knows Jimin from childhood and he knows Jimin is a troublemaker. After 1 hour, Mr. and Mrs. went to the airport. Here Yoongi and Jimin were sitting in the living room when Jimin said, You, Jimin said while pointing at Yoongi. Me? Yes, what? Yoongi asked.
Minnie needs a shower. Give a shower to Minnie, Jimin said. But Minnie is a big boy. He should take a shower on his own, Yoongi said. No, you'll give a shower to Minnie, Jimin said.
He sits on the floor and starts to throw his legs. Ish, fine, let's go. I'll give you a shower, Yoongi said. Pick me, Jimin said. Yoongi sighed and picked him up. He's gonna trouble me a lot, Yoongi mumbled. You said something cat-like, human? Jimin asked. No, how can I even say something, Yoongi said. Ha, don't you have tongue, uncle? Jimin asked. Ish, I've, Yoongi said. Soon they reached the washroom.
In the washroom, take off your clothes except boxers and then call me inside, Yoongi said. Okay, Jimin said.
He starts to take off his clothes and after sometimes he calls Yoongi inside. What the fuck? Where are you boxes? Yoongi yelled. Minnie does not like wearing them like showering, Jimin said. Don't you feel ashamed? Yoongi asked. No, give a shower to Minnie now, Jimin said. Fine, Yoongi said. He starts to give a shower to Jimin. He was rubbing shampoo on Jimin's hair when Jimin pulled his pants and boxes down. Yacht, Yoongi yelled. Haha, see how short your is. Mine is big, Jimin said while laughing. Yoongi pulled his pants and boxes up and said, Yeah, brat, shut up, Yoongi said. Jimin kept on laughing his lungs out. After some time, Yoongi was done giving a shower to Jimin, so he made him wear his clothes. Time skips. Yoongi was now sitting in the living room when Jimin yelled from the kitchen. Yoongi got up and rushed to the kitchen.
He came to the kitchen and his foot slipped and he fell on the floor. Ah, what the hell, Yoongi said. Jimin starts to laugh seeing Yoongi. Why you did this? Yoongi asked. Just for fun, Uncle Yoongi, Jimin said. Jimin spread oil on the floor to make Yoongi fell.
Jimin ran to the living room, leaving Yoongi on the floor. This brat, what should I do with him? Yoongi said. He got up from the floor and said, On my back, Jungkook was right on Grandpa. I agree now, Yoongi said. Yoongi went out of the kitchen. Next day, Jimin was sitting in the living room thinking how he should annoy Yoongi more. Let's give him coffee, but not normal coffee. Coffee with shaving cream, Jimin said. He smirked devilishly and went to the kitchen. By the way, he is out of little space now, but Yoongi don't know. After some time, he came back to the living room and saw Yoongi on the couch. Hey Yoongi, it's for you, Jimin said while giving him the coffee. You made it? Yoongi asked. Yes, Jimin replied. But how? You were in little space, Yoongi said. I'm out of little space now. It's not like that I'm little for all my life, Jimin said. Oh, that's great, then Yoongi said. Now taste the coffee and tell me how's it, Jimin said. Yoongi tasted the coffee and immediately splashed out. Egg, what the hell is this? Yoongi said.
Jimin starts to laugh hardly. What you mixed in this? Yoongi asked. Shaving cream, Jimin replied while laughing.
You little chick, Yoongi said. Jimin got up and ran to his room. Ish, he's still bratty even if he's not little, Yoongi said. Ah, Mama saved me from this brat, Yoongi said while fake crying. Time skips after several days. In these days, Jimin daily. used to annoy Yoongi, but Yoongi never talked in loud voice with him. Here Yoongi was standing in the garden while talking with someone on phone. I really love you so much, Yoongi said. Jimin, who was coming to throw him in the pool, listened it and rushed to his room. Yoongi came to the living room and didn't saw Jimin. Where is that troublemaker now? Yoongi said. He got up and went upstairs to Jimin's room. Outside the room. Jimin, are you inside? Yoongi asked. But he got no reply in return.
Jimin, Yoongi knocked and spoke again. Jimin, I'm worried and I'm coming inside, Yoongi said. He opened the door just to see Jimin laying on the floor and crying.
He rushed to Jimin and made him sit on the bed. Jimin, what's wrong? Yoongi asked. Jimin looked at Yoongi and pulled him in a kiss. Yoongi's eyes got widened by this act of Jimin. After some time, Jimin broke the kiss and hugged Yoongi. Why can't be me? Jimin asked. Huh? What are you saying, Jimin? Yoongi asked. Why you love as someone else? Why not me? Jimin asked. Yoongi got to know that Jimin listened everything. So you listened to everything I said while talking on the phone. Yoongi said, not everything, but you said I love you so much, Jimin said. That's why people says we should listen everything and then take out the conclusion, Yoongi said. Huh, what do you mean? Jimin asked. Stupid, I was talking with my cousin's sister, Yoongi said. So you love your cousin's sister, Jimin said. You chick-face human. He is 10 years old, Yoongi said while laughing. So what? I was just doing crying prank, Jimin said. He was embarrassed by his act now. Yoongi pushed Jimin on the bed and held his hands above his head and hovered him. So kissing me was also prank, Yoongi asked. Why yes, Jimin said. Kids, we came at the wrong time, Mrs. Park said. They came back to home directly to surprise Yoonmin, but they got surprised themselves. Enjoy, kids, Mr. Park said.
Mr. and Mrs. Park went out of the room. Now, tell me what was that? Yoongi asked. And nothing, Jimin said.
Don't lie to my face. I know you love me, Yoongi said. No, I don't, Jimin said. All right, then I'll go find someone else for me, Yoongi said. Shut up, you 𝑏***. Don't you even dare. You're only mine, Jimin said. Finally, you confessed. BTW, I won't find someone else. I only love you, Yoongi said. Jimin was about to say something when. So when's the marriage, Mrs. Park said. You guys went out, didn't you? Jimin said. Nah, we listened to everything, Mr. Park said. You guys, Jimin said. Mr. and Mrs. Park laughed and said. Now if both our kids love each other, then you guys will get married, Mr. Park said.
Yes, Uncle, Yoongi said. It was also the last wish of your dad, Yoongi, Mrs. Park said. Really? Yoongi asked.
Yes, Mrs. Park said. I made the best decision, then Yoongi said. Indeed, sons, Mr. Park said. I love you, Chim. Let's get married, Yoongi said. I love you more, and yes, let's get married, Jimin said. Then they got married and started to live their happily life with never-ending fights and love. The end.